As a kid, I remember playing the popular 80s arcade games of my time. The memories of playing Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and Galaga were some of the best games of that time. These games were so popular that they quickly became the center of attention at the local arcade. In fact, most people can still remember playing these classic 80s arcade games. The 80s arcade was a magical time for video game enthusiasts. It was a period of great innovation and creativity in the video game industry, with companies like Atari, Nintendo, and Sega releasing some of the most iconic games in history. The 80s arcade was also a time of great competition, with each company trying to outdo the other with their own creative ideas. The 80s arcade was also the time when video games started to become popular, with millions of people around the world playing these games in their homes or in the arcades. This popularity of 80s arcade games eventually led to the emergence of gaming consoles, which took gaming to a whole new level. The popularity of 80s arcade games was due to the creativity and innovation of the developers. These games were developed with the intention of providing gamers with a unique and exciting experience. Many of the games even featured storylines, characters, and unique mechanics that made them stand out from the competition. The games were also incredibly addictive. The challenge of beating the high scores and the excitement of seeing your name on the leaderboards kept gamers coming back for more. This addictive nature of the 80s arcade games was also one of the main reasons why they quickly became popular. There were a variety of 80s arcade games that were popular during this time. Some of the most iconic games of the period included Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Galaga, Donkey Kong, and Centipede. In addition, there were also a variety of sports games like NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, as well as puzzle games like Tetris and Dr. Mario. The 80s arcade games were also divided into two main categories: coin-op and console. Coin-op games were those that were played in the arcades. Console games, on the other hand, were those that were played on gaming consoles like the NES and the Sega Genesis. Both types of games had their own unique appeal and were popular with gamers of all ages. Playing 80s arcade games is not as difficult as it may seem. All you need is some spare change and an arcade machine. The gameplay of games is quite simple. You start off by inserting coins into the machine, and then you use the controller to move your character around the screen. You can then use the buttons on the controller to jump, shoot, or interact with the environment. The goal of most games is to reach the highest score possible. This is typically done by killing as many enemies as possible and collecting as many points as you can. As you progress through the game, the levels become increasingly difficult. If you want to experience the 80s arcade again, there are a few places you can go to play these classic games. You can visit a local arcade, which are typically found in shopping malls. You can also visit a bar or restaurant that has an arcade machine. If you don't have access to a local arcade, you can also find arcade games online. There are a variety of websites that offer free or paid versions of classic arcade games. You can also find emulators that allow you to play the original versions of these games on your computer or gaming console. The 80s arcade was home to some of the most popular and iconic video games of all time. Here are some of the most popular and iconic 80s arcade games. Pac-Man. This iconic game was developed by Namco and is considered to be one of the most influential video games of all time. The objective of the game is to move the yellow character around the maze, collecting dots and avoiding ghosts. Space Invaders. Developed by Taito, this game is considered to be one of the earliest shooters. The objective of the game is to shoot down the invading aliens before they reach the bottom of the screen. Galaga. Developed by Namco, this game is a sequel to the popular game, Galaxian. The objective of the game is to shoot down the enemy ships before they reach the bottom of the screen. Donkey Kong. Developed by Nintendo, this game is considered to be one of the most influential platformers of all time. The objective of the game is to help Mario save the kidnapped princess from the clutches of the evil Donkey Kong. The 80s arcade games can also be experienced on modern gaming systems. There are a variety of retro gaming systems that allow you to play classic 80s arcade games. Some of the most popular retro gaming systems include the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, the Sega Genesis, and the PlayStation Classic. These retro gaming systems come pre-loaded with a selection of classic 80s arcade games. This means that you don't have to search for and download the games separately. All you have to do is plug in the system and you can start playing the games right away. In addition to the retro gaming systems, there is also GameStop Retro. This is a service offered by the popular video game retailer, GameStop. The service allows you to purchase classic 80s arcade games and have them delivered to your home. The games are delivered on cartridges, which you can then plug into your gaming console. This makes it easy to play the classic 80s arcade games in the comfort of your own home. If you want to take the 80s arcade experience home, there are a few things you can do. You can purchase a retro gaming console and start playing some of the classic 80s arcade games. You can also purchase cartridges of classic 80s arcade games from GameStop Retro. You can also try to find some of the original arcade machines from the 80s. These machines can often be found in antique stores or online. If you are lucky, you might even find an original Pac-Man machine. The 80s arcade was a magical time for video game enthusiasts. It was a period of great innovation and creativity in the video game industry, with companies like Atari, Nintendo, and Sega releasing some of the most iconic games in history. The 80s arcade was also a time of great competition, with each company trying to outdo the other with their own creative ideas. The video game industry has massively grown over time, and video gameplay is currently among the most fashionable ways to pass the time. Interestingly enough, video gaming actually started in the 1950s, and the 80s arcade was the first period where video games became incredibly popular. If you want to experience the 80s arcade again, there are a few places you can go to play these classic games. You can visit a local arcade, which are typically found in shopping malls. Alternatively, you can also purchase retro gaming systems or cartridges of classic 80s arcade games from GameStop Retro. The 80s arcade was an important period in the history of video games, and it is still fondly remembered by gamers of all ages.